Welcome to the Geek in Review, the podcast focused on innovative and creative ideas in the legal industry. I'm Greg Lambert. Marlene is out sick this week, so everyone's just stuck with me. However, I have a very special guest here with me who is absolutely amazing, and I'm so happy to have her on the show. So Stefanie Marrone, outsourced marketer to law firms and legal service providers. Thank you very much for coming on the Geek in Review.
Thank you so much, Greg, and I hope Marlene feels better. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, you have just a very large presence on social media platforms, and I know I see great content from you on platforms like LinkedIn. So I want to know, how did you go from being on the marketing teams at law firms like Mofo and Proskauer to the consulting work that you've done for the past few years?
Yeah, so it's funny, actually. I had a social media presence back then as well. And I always tell people when you're in-house, it's a little difficult in terms of how to manage your personal brand while working full-time and managing the expectations of your employers and what to post. And, are you going to alert them that maybe you're looking for a job or you're building your own brand at the expense of the firm? And it's a fine line. So I know that I'm definitely more visible now than I was before, but I had been building my brand for a very long time, Greg. So much so that when I started my own business, I could, because I had been present on social and doing things like promoting speaking engagements I was doing and promoting articles I had written. So a lot of the JD Super articles I'd written, and I have a blog, the socialmediabutterflyblog.com, through Lex blog, that I was also promoting that content. So there are ways I feel like an in-house marketer could do a lot of these things, but I was using LinkedIn long before I think most people were. When I worked at a firm that rhymes with Pullivan and Romwell, I said, we should get on LinkedIn. And they said, what? No, we don't need LinkedIn. And now they have like 4 or 5 people who manage their LinkedIn presence, which always makes me giggle, right? Like I was way ahead of my time, but I got pretty active on social, especially during the pandemic. I think like a lot of people did, to feel connected to other people. I also accidentally started my own business. This was not exactly what I set out to do. I was the CMO of a mid-sized law firm and I lost my job and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I started this business as an interim step, and it took off, so much so in part because I already had a built-in audience that I could work with, people who knew me because I'd been on social. And also, by the way, speaking engagements for me were huge. People had seen me speak and they knew that I knew what I was talking about. So that I would tell people, if you're not comfortable with social media, you can always also consider speaking engagements as well, and writing and all of those things. And so I just ramped up my presence, but the business was really born from the things I love to do. And I work with mostly small and mid-sized firms, and I do a lot of outsourced CMO work. So fractional CMO work, marketing work, and then some social media work, of course, LinkedIn training and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I know that you tend to focus on what the legal professionals are doing when it comes to social media. What were some of the catalysts that made you want to focus on helping the industry improve in this area of content and marketing?
Okay, so I feel like law firms lag behind in so many ways and in so many areas. So, the bar is so low.
Wasn't very high, right?
No, it wasn't high, but there was a huge opportunity, right? All law firms could do better. There are so many law firms that have thousands, if not tens of thousands of followers, and they're not engaging with their audience in an effective way. They're making a lot of mistakes. Like they're not utilizing that audience. They're doing a lot of what I call me-centric content. We're humbled and honored to announce that we recently had 100 million super lawyers, or we recently closed this blank deal. It's we, and instead of like having client-centric content. So what I tried to do was also, by the way, look outside the industry and seek inspiration from other industries and bring voices in. I know we work in a B2B world, but I think I talk about B to H. And so business to human is a little bit more about what I think sells today. We don't like to use that word selling, but I do think that we are selling to people who want to buy legal services, and they want to do business with people who they know and they like and they trust. And they care, I think, less about the name on the door than the lawyer doing the work for them. So this is why also I feel like lawyers do need to focus on building their personal brands. And I also think there's just such opportunity. For example, LinkedIn is free. I mean, most of these channels are free, and people just do not take advantage of them. And out of the 800 million people, Greg, who use LinkedIn, 1% of those people post content on LinkedIn. And of that 1%, I would say 98% of that content is not good. It's very self-promotional and boastful and not helpful. And so I try to be a fresh voice. I try to add stories and helpful vantage points, but also do that for my clients in a way that still is substantive and also reflects, the firm culture and that sort of thing. But you can do that. It's not an oxymoron, actually. The two can coexist.
Is there a particular industry that you think is doing a much better job than the legal? I know all industries are probably doing a better job, but is there any, one or two industries that you think are really solid on how they do their the marketing via social media?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I think that there are some financial service companies that do a great job. Like I'll say some of the big four, like PwC, I think has so much interesting content. And I'll tell you why. It's because they don't just have dry, boring business content. They actually inject their people into their content. They feature the good works of the firm and the company. They feature studies. And so many law firms are not doing that sort of thing. They're not doing thought leadership in a way that's effective. This is also why, so I don't just work with law firms. I work with some legal service providers, and that's been among the most fun things I've done over the last few years is, helping to bring to market some of their thought leadership and their surveys, because what we do can tend to be dry, but even when you have dry content, the way you portray it visually can really make it much more interesting. So I would say, like, sometimes I'll look at Goldman Sachs, sometimes I'll look at PwC, and then sometimes I will look totally out of the industry, like, what's the Food Network doing? I've learned a ton about short form videos from those kinds of organizations. Bloomberg does a terrific job. It has different sectors and each of them has a different field, but that's also been really helpful. And then there are a lot of, I would say, clothing retailers and beauty companies that also do a really good job of injecting some creativity in their posts. Now, not necessarily on LinkedIn. That's more on Instagram, but there are ways to channel some of those ideas for business content. And that's always what I've tried to do, is just kind of, disrupt a little bit, but encourage lawyers to think a little differently. Now, I don't know that every big law firm or the top 25 would want to do that with me, but that's also why I think it's been easier to work with some smaller and mid-sized firms, because they're willing to take more risks and it's less red tape.
On LinkedIn specifically, and that's where I kind of see you the most. I'm not a big Instagram kind of person, but I love LinkedIn. I know you were talking about being able to tell a story on platforms like LinkedIn. What are some of the other things that we're kind of missing out on, especially when it comes to LinkedIn, which is a real professional market? This is an area where you're going to see your peers and potential customers. So what's some things that we could be doing better?
Okay, so here are some things you could be doing better. And I would say the same tips that I'm giving you here would be tips that I would say an individual could do, or a company page. I will also put one caveat. It's very difficult for a company page to go viral. In fact, I would say it's almost impossible. So you don't necessarily need to follow all of the same rules. The only way to get really good engagement with a LinkedIn company page is to get your employees to share your content. And that's what most firms don't do. So your employees can either be your strongest brand ambassadors or your weakest, and you need to tap into their valuable networks, because let's say your firm has 5,000 connections, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there's overlap or all 5,000 of those people follow your lawyers, or that they're going to see it, because the algorithm is so tricky it makes you not see this content. So I just want to say that. So some of the things that I've seen work really well: short form video, number one. So it's really hard for people to put themselves on video, and I feel like it's an underutilized tool. I also think that most law firms have video that they don't even realize they have. And let me give you a few examples. Number one, every webinar you've done has a video component if you've recorded it on Zoom or something else. A lot of people don't strip it out. So, okay, number one, nobody wants to watch that 50-minute video unless they're getting CLE credit, okay? And if you post that 50-minute video on LinkedIn, nobody's going to watch anything but the first 3 minutes. So if it's just introductions, you've lost people. But what you can do is splice it up into 10, 15 segments. And usually webinars are, evergreen. So they're a little bit less timely. Sometimes they are timely, but there are elements of it that are evergreen, that you can reuse and repurpose, that are timeless. So find those segments. And what I always do, Greg, is I get the transcript. There's a lot of services. I've used Otter before. There's Rev. There's a lot of them. And so download that transcript. Number one, you've got a blog post or several. You've got social media copy for days, quotes, all of those things. And then you've got these short form video segments, and you don't have to be an expert in video editing either. I'm not. What I do with my videos is a trick that my friend Alexis Robertson, who works at Foley and Lardner, she taught me this. I was like, how did you make those short videos? She does it with the screen recording button feature on the iPhone. So in videos like uploaded to YouTube, she'll just get and screen grab the section that she wants and then cut it down, like right from there. I literally do it on my couch while I'm watching House of Dragons or White Lotus, and it's so easy. So, okay, short form video. The video should be no more than 3.5 minutes, okay? The second thing, list posts. They do so well. So 10 reasons why you should have a LinkedIn strategy, 10 reasons why you should listen to this podcast that we're on right now. Right. That's great. And I'll tell you, I'm so scared of Chat GPT, and we could talk about that if you want. But if you asked it to write a post about this, it literally would, but don't just take it at face value. You have to add your own spin to it, but it'll at least give you a starting point. But tips, those pieces do so well. An infographic, bringing to life your content with an image that actually has substance. That's great. Please don't use any images that are stock images, particularly in the DEI space. And just if you're trying to show your lawyers, don't make them, don't use anything that's not your people. And so I would say those kinds of things do really well. And again, with video, if you could bring to life a client alert, get your lawyers to talk about, distill down the key points of the client alert. One more tip, carousel images. Nobody is doing this for the most part. Carousels are so easy to create. You can actually do it natively now on LinkedIn, or you can do it through Canva, which is the graphic design program I use. And you would essentially so let's say it was 5 changes in California pay transparency, which is actually something I worked on recently. It's an alert. Right. I'm going to break it up into a carousel post, which would have one page graphically with each of those tips or 5 changes, whatever it is. And then people scroll through it. So you upload it as a PDF. Why do I like these, Greg? Is because there's more dwell time. People spend more time scrolling through, and they usually save this content, which is really good for your engagement. Because remember, social media success isn't just about the number of likes. It's about the number of comments you have, but more importantly, the engagement you get on your posts. So that's also why videos do well. and also why these carousel posts do well. And they help you bring to life your content in a way that the written word just doesn't. So those are just some ideas, and those are all things that individuals and lawyers, law firms could do.
I want to go back to one of the things you started off this answer with, and that was leveraging all of the professionals that you have at your firm to repost or to post the content as well. And we do that here. And I think one of the kind of the common things that I hear from attorneys is that I don't want to look like I'm just reposting content. So what do you say to that argument? And I guess the mean way to say it was, I don't want to be a shill for my firm doing that. So how do you get over that uncomfortableness with the attorneys?
Okay, so a number of things on this. Number one, I would say that I do not like that instant repost feature. I think LinkedIn launched it, I think, last year. And what it does is make it a little too easy to post things because it doesn't allow you to put your own spin on it and give your own vantage point, your own insights. So it's essentially a waste of a post. If you, Greg, share something about an M&A deal that your firm just did, I don't understand the context. I assume it's because you're saying, oh, look at this deal my firm closed, but I don't know the role you had on it. Especially if I'm the lawyer who worked on it, I should say that. I was really proud to work on the, please don't say proud, but it's constructed in a way that is more effective. I had the opportunity to work on this deal and help blah, blah, blah with blah, 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 right? Context is important. Maybe you're the marketing person who supports that group and you say, I worked on the RFP that helped to get this new client, and I'm so proud to see my firm do that. So context is everything. You're not building your brand. You're confusing people, I think. The other thing is, it's not enough to just send an email to the firm and say, we just posted this, please share. You need to do more. Right. And this is also why I don't love those instant sharing programs that they have, because again, it doesn't give you the opportunity to put your own take on things or develop your own brand. What I would recommend doing is picking and choosing the things that make sense for you. And some of these things will fall in your wheelhouse, and that's okay. Like it would be okay if, let's say I'm a litigator and the Labor and Employment Group just put out an alert on pay transparency. Well, there I may have contacts that would find that interesting. So I should give an intro about why I'm sharing it. So California recently came out with some new regulations for employers and pay transparency. All employers should really pay attention to this. Reach out to my partner, so-and-so, who wrote this alert to find out more. You're doing an intro. Maybe there's even an origination there for you, or, you're definitely going to make better friends with your colleagues for doing that. So there's that. I don't think everyone should post the same thing either, nor do I think that the firm should be providing language for people to post. I'll give you an example. When I worked at MoFo, for example, we had a huge deal, and we also had we acquired a German firm, and so we opened up a Germany office. Well, we wrote something, and we asked the lawyers to share it. And guess what happened? 200 lawyers shared the same thing within a 2-hour period, and it showed up on a lot of people's feeds. So that, right, I think, defeated the purpose of building a brand and showcasing things, because it just seemed like it was company speak. It seemed like they were all brainwashed employees. So you have to add context, and it has to be relevant. You confuse people when you share things from your firm without saying why. It's just better than to give a like to the post, because if you like a post, there is an opportunity that post could show up in somebody's newsfeed. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Yeah, no, that was good. I think one of the things that a lot of marketing teams want to do is make it easy. And sometimes making it easy can have other, other repercussions on it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, listen, the intention is always from a good place. It's just that then it could open up a Pandora's box, especially if the lawyer or who's ever sharing it is not well-versed, Greg, in social media. So that's where you get into the tricky thing where they hit that instant repost button, or they share it without the context or with something that doesn't quite make sense. So that's why training, to me, is the most important thing that you can do for your lawyers. Periodic training, best practices, how to use LinkedIn, and actually sit with them and show them how to use the platform. How do you actually share something? People are scared. How do you use the featured section? Greg, do you have your podcast on the featured section of your page?
I'm trying to think if I do. So, well, speaking of podcasts, let's talk about this platform that we're on now. Well, do you think that podcasts are worth creating for legal professionals?
Okay. Do I think podcasts are worth creating for legal professionals? I think it depends. I think it's a saturated market, and I think that you really have to have a unique vantage point. I think you have to bring something to the market, and you, just like with blogging, you have to commit to it, because if you don't, you will not have success. You also have to market it. And I think that again brings us back to what we just spoke about. If you don't know how to market things and you don't utilize LinkedIn and social media, you're not going to be effective when it comes to this. I do think podcasts are incredibly powerful. There's no better medium to reach people today. Like, I'm busy, you're busy. Sometimes while I'm cleaning my house, Greg, I listen to podcasts when I work out, when I'm driving. You can't do that with video, or at least please don't, because you will get into an accident, and Greg and I don't want to be responsible for that. So I would say don't do that. But I do think podcasts can be effective. You just have to have really good content, have a good angle, and market it. So your podcast, again, could be turned into video segments, into blog posts, and you should be promoting it on social several times. One of the biggest mistakes law firms make, and most professionals, Greg, is they do what I call one and done, which is posting something on social once and it never sees the light of day again. And most of a podcast content is evergreen. Again, it can be reused and repurposed. Many people never need to create another new piece of content. But like, for example, so let's say it's a year from now, and this is your highest rated podcast, because it should be, right? And you want to do another, you want to re-release it. There's not much that's going to change here unless ChatGPT and robots and AI take over the world in the next year, but hopefully not. But so you have content that you could repost, and another idea, Greg, for you and for all the other people out there who have a podcast would be periodically do a roundup of your top podcasts, and maybe even the end of the year, these are our top 10 podcasts of the year, and you tag the person who was in it, and it's extra visibility for them too. So what's better than that, right?
Right.
So it's just about being smart about promoting it, committing to doing it, and having a really interesting vantage point. But if you don't know what your take is going to be and what you're going to bring to the table, there's a lot of litigation podcasts out there, believe it or not. There's a lot of lawyers, and also I think you have to have the personality for it. You have to know the right questions to ask, and you know all that, right? You've been doing this for a while. So what do you think?
Actually heard we did a podcast here at the firm where it was interesting because we actually brought in a doctor to talk about some legal issues. And the doctor who had his own podcast said something that I thought was really interesting, and that was, I'm not the expert at this. So when I ask questions, it's really genuine questions about a topic that I want to know more about. I'm not trying to just frame a question. And I think sometimes with podcasts, especially people who are, true experts in the field, they can kind of leave their audience behind by not asking kind of more of the simple questions and allowing the guest to, if that's the type of platform they have, allowing the guest to kind of fill in the blanks of
Right.
a legitimate question. So
I agree. Also, by the way, podcasting is a little less, I guess, scary than being on video. Video's scary. Showing up on video, especially live video. Podcasting, doesn't matter if you're in your pajamas, like you can still do it unless there's a video component. I just want everyone to know that Greg and I are not wearing pajamas today.
Yep.
But, you know, you should know he's wearing his firm button, I guess, zipper.
I am branded. So.
Yeah, you are branded. So, you know, it's a little less scary for those people who are nervous about being on camera.
Yeah, I found that to be true. A lot of people, when we set up interviews, when I tell them that we're only going to use the audio content, it's like the pressure, you can just see the pressure release from them. And a lot of times once they do one the first time, then they get the bug and they're like, oh, you know, this was very easy to do. I want to do another one later on. So
yeah,
I think people get really comfortable with podcast, and I know it's a saturated market, but I think when it comes to really good content, it's not all that saturated.
Exactly. And it's also, remember, just like I said with LinkedIn, it's not about how many people view it, it's who views it.
Yeah.
Greg, also, if you heard barking in my background, that was not me. I have 2 French bulldogs, and they are barking at the front door. So.
All right. Introduce both dogs to us. What are their names?
So I have a 2.5-year-old French bulldog named Lucy, and then I got Lucy a dog 5 months after I got Lucy because she was very high maintenance and needed a constant attention, particularly when I was working from home. And her name is Scarlett. So there are 2 of them, and they're on Instagram at Lucy Scarlett Frenchies.
Oh, my goodness. There we go.
Not hard to become famous when you're a Frenchie. Let's just say that.
It
but
is
Instagram,
not.
Greg, so hard if you're a lawyer or a law firm. I've even struggled on Instagram massively. Like I have over 20,000 followers on LinkedIn and a very sad 1,500 on Instagram.
I'm not an Instagram page. So, well, that reminds me then, what are some of, I know LinkedIn is kind of a go-to network for professionals. What about others? And I laugh because, you know, Twitter, I think the consensus with most people on Twitter right now is they're going to write it out until it either continues or explodes. So, you know, what are some of the other platforms that you think lawyers have, a reasonable expectation to, you know, put content out there or build their brand on?
Okay, so I think lawyers should really just focus on LinkedIn for the most part. When you think about which channels on which you should be, really what you should think about is where are your clients and your referrals and your prospects, and maybe you're looking for recruits, and that is where you should focus. And so I think each channel also can serve a unique purpose. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to the content that you post. So like, for example, you're not going to post the same thing on Instagram as you would post on Twitter than you would post on LinkedIn. It's all very different content. So I would personally suggest that you pick 1 or 2 platforms and only focus on them. When you do all of them, you tend to do all of them lackluster. You know, I think it could be much better to be focused on 1 or 2. I would tell you to not ignore YouTube, because I do think if you have video content and podcasts, you need to post those things on YouTube. YouTube is owned by Google. YouTube has incredible high search domain authority, just like, by the way, LinkedIn does. For my lawyer friends, your bio will be your website bio will be your number 1 Google search result, your LinkedIn profile number 2, and YouTube 3. But the firm's LinkedIn profile right up there. Okay. So you're missing an opportunity if you don't repost, but when you post a YouTube video to social media, I would personally either you post it directly from, like, you save it to your computer and post it natively in LinkedIn so you're not taking people off. You don't have to follow that rule on the company page because the rules really don't apply there because you can't go viral. You want to direct them to your website where the video lives, and then it's an embedded on your page but plays through YouTube, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Okay. So YouTube,
that makes total
LinkedIn,
sense.
I think jury's out on Twitter, but I've never seen a law firm using Twitter effectively, and I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that. And the only lawyers who really use Twitter effectively are the lawyers, I think, who are communicating with reporters and building relationships with reporters. Instagram is so tricky. For individual lawyers, it's almost impossible to build a brand there. For law firms, dry, boring business content will never go anywhere there. The only content that will do okay is the content that peeks behind the curtains. So the content that's about firm life, firm culture, your people, so Q&As, maybe with a lateral, Q&As with your alumni, your good works. By the way, Greg, the number one top-rated social media posts in terms of like a group would be the ones that focus on CSR and community service and pro bono. So those are the posts that do the best. They are not the posts that involve lawyer awards, much to the chagrin of most lawyers. Okay.
Especially after the money that they paid for those awards.
Yeah, exactly. I would say most law firms do not need to be on TikTok. In fact, I will ask you to please not go on TikTok. I just don't think it's necessary right now. And I think, so Facebook can be tricky. Again, law firms can be on Facebook for recruiting and softer side news, but for lawyers, it really depends on where you get your business from and how you use Facebook. Like if you're using Facebook to share content about your family, you don't necessarily, you want to make it a public thing, and I think people have to understand also your private life is your private life and your public life is your public life. I have two Instagram accounts, Greg. One is my personal Instagram that has pictures of my dogs and my niece and nephew for the most part. And that is private. And there are 186 people on there. And then I have my work one that has, sad 1,500 that I've been trying to grow for years. And that's where I post my work content. And those two are very separate. And my dog's account, which my dogs have more followers than me. So that's also funny. So I would just say make sure that you audit your presence and that you are also keeping track of who is in your network, and don't feel obliged to accept every request when it comes to your personal life as well. Maybe give them the option of following you as a public account as well. But I think my long-winded way of saying, focus on where your clients are is the most important thing.
Yeah. How do you measure success when it comes to social media? I know we said earlier that it's not about the number of likes. So if it's not about the number of likes, how do you kind of measure whether what you're doing is succeeding or not?
Yeah, I would love to tell you that I could track the ROI of my clients getting new clients directly from a social media post, but alas, I cannot. What I can tell you is that social media success is an amalgamation of a lot of different things. When you hear somebody say, wow, you guys are everywhere. Wow, your social media looks amazing. Wow, you guys are doing this and that. I didn't realize it. And the person saying it is a GC, or the person saying it is an alum who's referred work to you. It's building brand awareness to a point where it is impacting decision making. So it's just another way to influence buyer decisions, but it's also another way to disseminate information and another way to reinforce what you want to reinforce when it comes to your brand and your firm. And that's something to keep in mind. And I think that's also why law firms need a social media strategy, and why lawyers and any marketing professional or any business professional who is serious about being on social media needs to create a social media strategy. Otherwise, you're throwing spaghetti at the wall, Greg. And I'm Italian. I love spaghetti, but what I don't like is spaghetti thrown at the wall. And that's what I feel like a lot of firms and people do. You need a strategy to make sure that what you're doing is actually effective. Now, of course, you should look at your analytics. There are tons of analytics you can see, like which posts did better than others. Instead of tracking the number of likes, look at engagement, because that will tell you much more than the number of likes. But you should also look at, if you have, and I see this a lot with the big firms, they have hundreds of thousands of followers and 10 likes. Well, they're doing something wrong there. And the people liking the post aren't even relevant to the industry. They're random people. They're not even their employees. So you need to look at that, because then you have a problem. You have an internal communications problem, and you have an audience problem. So I would say it's a lot of different things there, but you don't want to throw the spaghetti at the wall, and you definitely want to make sure what you're posting resonates. You won't know. Okay, another thing, let me mention this.
Okay.
Most people look at social media in invisible only mode, silent mode. You know how it is. Like, you'll look at actually, Greg, I don't know that you've ever liked one of my posts, but maybe you've seen them and you like my content, because most people don't feel the need to hit that like button. In fact, they're uncomfortable doing it, but they like it. They keep it in their back pocket. So everybody needs to remember that for those days where they feel like, oh, darn, I only got 10 likes or whatever it is. But keep that in your back pocket for a rainy day. You're posting for all of the people who are engaging, but more for the people who aren't, who are very likely to hire you regardless. So think about that silent audience.
Oh, that makes sense. And now you make me wonder whether or not, because I know you do a lot of videos, and I've watched a number of the videos, and now I'm trying to think if
I was
click
just
the like
teasing.
button.
I don't actually know if you like them. I don't know. If you don't like it, that's fine. We can talk about that later. But I guess I wouldn't be on the podcast if you didn't like it. So
yeah, exactly. I do like it. So, and you talked about the social media strategy, especially an individual lawyer or another legal professional that's looking to have a strategy to build their brand, to create content. Is that something they should do themselves, or should they reach out to either a professional in their marketing department if they have one, or should they reach out to a consultant like yourself? What's your advice?
So I think it depends. I think that you should go into your resources first and foremost, because you have those internal resources. I know that it can sometimes be a little difficult to tap into those resources because there isn't enough of those to go around to everybody. I think it's going to also depend on how serious you are about making a commitment. Now, these are things also you can do yourself. Setting up your own social media calendar and strategy doesn't have to be hard. What I would recommend people do is actually think about the content pillars and then develop those. So content pillars, Greg, are the 3 to 5 areas in your wheelhouse that support your brand and your business. And those are the areas you're going to only write about. So for somebody like me, it would be, let's say, broadly speaking, legal marketing. Then another one would be LinkedIn. Maybe another area would be, more generally speaking, social media. And then maybe a fourth one, I have a Women Who Wow initiative where I feature women in the legal industry and beyond and their interesting backgrounds. So I'm not going to deviate on those. Actually, one more, professional development. That's like a catch-all, and personal branding. Right. I don't deviate from those topics. You're not going to see me write about the trucking industry. First of all, I know nothing about the trucking industry. And second of all, it wouldn't make sense for my brand. So lawyers could think about those 5 areas for themselves, and then under there are sub areas. So maybe it's then an industry focus. And then the tactic would be how to convey that information, whether you're going to repurpose a webinar, do a podcast, promote an event at which you spoke, all those sorts of things. I think also the cadence of posting needs to be something you think about. You cannot expect to be successful on social media if you show up every few months. You also do not need to post, though, every day. In fact, if you think your content might be lackluster, you want to post fewer days. So I would recommend that you post really good content like 2 to 3 days a week, and then maybe skip the other days. You don't have to show up every day. In fact, you can be overexposed, which sometimes I actually worry about. So sometimes I pull back. Also think about the time of day when you should post. That's also really important. But it's always good to get the feedback from a professional. There are a lot of resources out there. I don't know that you have to hire somebody you also should just make sure that if you work for an organization, you work for a law firm, that you have the blessing of that law firm to post that content. Hate to be Debbie Downer, but there are social media guidelines for every firm. And of course, never talk about a deal or a matter before it's public. And even then, I would still exercise caution when it comes to that. So it's a fine line, but you certainly could engage with a professional to do these things, but don't ask the professional to write your own posts. Like, people will ask me to do that, and I don't do that. I can't write in your voice. You can only do that. I can give you ideas, but the secret sauce each of us have is our experiences, our stories, our viewpoints, and you can give someone like an outline, but you can't capture their spirit and essence. So
gotcha.
Some people might do it. I just don't do that.
Yeah. Well, your comment on being careful to make sure that you're following social media guidelines reminds me, and I think this may have been in the 90s when we were able to and just start posting anything on the internet. It wasn't necessarily social media. We joked back then that the number one rule for online content was don't post anything stupid. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty good rule. I don't know if you remember that example, but remember when Above the Law's message boards were super hot and there were people would be posting things. Like, there was someone on an Acela talking about like a law firm potential merger, a lawyer, and somebody overheard in the seat behind them, and that was not good. And it was also an example of a lawyer who posted that she was in a hotel room where it was essentially Walmart's headquarters. There are no other companies in that area, and it was pretty clear on what she was working, and she got in big trouble for doing that. So, you know, even if you think your network is private, it's not. People can screenshot anything they want.
That's for sure. So, well, that gets us to the part of the show where we ask our guests the crystal ball question, and I'm super excited to ask you and hear what you have to say on this. So what do you see as a challenge or a change for the legal market in social media or just marketing altogether over the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, 3 to 5 years is tricky. There are so many things. I'm concerned about the rise of AI. I brought it up a little bit before. I'm concerned about tools like ChatGPT, and there are others. I think they can be incredibly useful when used the right way, but I also worry about these tools and taking away the heart of some of the posts. And I also worry about the ramifications of using some of these, because if you type in something and I type in something, we could get very similar results, which will also be problematic if we're turning it into a social media post or a blog post. So I don't know that we've fully understood the scope of this and the ramifications, and I think lawyers are going to have a lot of fun with this topic. I also think that we still need to shift to a more in-person mentality. I think that people have gotten a little bit lazy about going back to networking events, going back in person, and I don't necessarily think we can do everything online. Like, I love webinars, Greg. I love social media, but I don't think there's any substitution for in-person networking. And I myself have to force myself to go to conferences again. I've gotten so used to this new normal. I think webinars are here to stay, and they should be, and they help us bring content to so many people we wouldn't normally get to do otherwise. But I think we also need to make sure that we are going to conferences. We're seeing our clients in person. Like, go on that site visit. Go visit them at their offices. All of those things. Take them to that Yankees game or whatever sports team you like. It's really important to maintain.
Yeah, it'd be the rodeo here.
Take them to the rodeo. All of those things are really important to manage and maintain relationships. And then I would say that any lawyer that doesn't think, or law firm that doesn't think they need to be on social media is behind the times. Like, you may be in the enviable position of having tons of clients, and that's great for you. But you need to be top of mind. And today's generation of decision makers grew up with an iPhone in the bassinet, and they know how to, my niece is 4. She knows how to Google everything. So you better believe that your client in their 20s and 30s, and by the way, also I'll go as far as to say baby boomers who now know how to use everything with technology because their kids and their grandkids are, so they've adapted as well. So you really need to adapt technology and have a strong online presence, because whether you like it or not, everybody's searching for us online, and everybody is looking at your LinkedIn profile, whether you're on LinkedIn every day or once a year. So you might as well make it work for you.
Well, Stefanie Marrone, thank you very much for coming in. This was just as enjoyable as I thought it was going to be. So thanks for coming in.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much, Greg. This was fun. And maybe when I come to Texas, you'll take me to the rodeo.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got to come in March, though.
Okay.
So, and of course, thanks to all of you for taking the time to listen to the Geek in Review. If you enjoy the show, and I hope you do, share it with a colleague, post it on social media. We'd love that too. And we'd love to hear from you. So reach out to us and Marlene can be found on Twitter at GayBauerM, and I can be reached at Glambert on Twitter. Stefanie, what about you? What's the best place for folks to find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, just Stefanie Marrone, and also Twitter, very creatively, Stefanie Marrone, and Instagram, Stefanie Marrone Legal Marketing. And then, my blog, Greg, the social media butterflyblog.com. All
right. And you can reach out to us there, or if you want to go old school, you can leave us a voicemail on our Geek in Review hotline at 713-487-7821. And as always, the music you hear is from Jerry David DeSica. Thank you, Jerry. And thanks once again, Stefanie.